Did you know that if you roll the suspicious trenchcoat with the on Thieves gloves, then all 3 copies will roll 2 new artifacts, which can potentially roll a new trenchcoat for even more copies. This item sounds overpowered, unless of course you get Spectral cutlass twice, because now your unit won't teleport to the mirrored hex and instead will stay exactly where you left it. Here are 11 more interactions from set 11 you didn't know about. But before we get started, only a small percent of my viewers are subscribed, which is a shame because my subscribers are blessed with good fortune and will definitely get a double treasure chest sentinel in their next game. Warning, subscribers are not guaranteed to get a good outcome and will likely get more talked. Let's start the video with more suspicious trenchcoat because it is quickly becoming my favorite artifact in the game. Sorry Trickster's Glass, you've been replaced. Some players might have noticed that the HP values from the copies don't make any sense, and there is a very good reason for this. If you pay attention to all the stats before and after the split, you can see that the copies are always reduced to 1-star values, even if the original unit had a higher star level. I believe this bug first appeared around the B patch because at least on the PBE server, everything was still working fine. But this does not mean that the code is currently useless. In fact, it is even more buggy than you can imagine and an amazing choice for bruisers. The HP for bruiser copies takes the base value of the 1-star, adds 100 HP from the trait, and then adds all the bonus HP that the original unit received from the bruiser trait. If you ever wondered why your Rek'Sai copies were so tanky, they were getting a massive amount of bonus HP from both the Dryad and the bruiser trait. But this is not the only bug for trenchcoat that is currently running around. There is a very powerful strategy based around the code in the early game. If you're playing Fated and connect Yasuo to the main pair, then every Fated unit will receive a 300 shield with 3 Fated or a 600 shield with 5 Fated at the start of combat. For some reason, if you give the trenchcoat to any Fated unit while Yasuo is part of the pair, then the copies will spawn with this start of combat shield as well. This is extremely difficult to deal with in the early game since your frontline has an additional 1800 HP as the shield does not have a time limit. While the previous 2 bugs from trenchcoat are likely going to get fixed in the upcoming patch, I did stumble upon another bug that might be around for 1 patch longer. Inspired by the Yasuo example, I tested different start of combat effects like Crown Guard and some of the support items to see if the copies are able to trigger any of them. As it turns out, yes, there is one support item that will trigger once the unit splits into 3, and it's Randuin's Omen. It is a bit hard to control where the copies land, but based on the landing position, they are able to grant additional armor and MR to every adjacent unit, allowing you to potentially get 4 times the value out of the support item. It is not the easiest combo to get, but it's probably worth going for if you end up with both of the combo pieces. Since we're already on the topic of bugs, let's keep the ball rolling because these artifacts are just not behaving how they should. For example, if you put an item like Fishbones or Rapid Fire Cannon on a 1-star unit and then upgrade this unit to 2-star, the range increase will trigger twice. This Kiana now has 4 hex range with 1 Fishbones instead of a 2 hex range. While initially this sounds super overpowered, it is not as bad as it seems. First of all, the effect will only work for 1 combat round. Afterwards, the item will reset to its intended values. In fact, this bug will only work if you stay on your own board. If you pack up your units and teleport to an enemy board, the stats should also reset and you don't receive any additional bonus range. You can also aim for the increased range with the Orn Thieves gloves if it rolls Fishbones or Rapid Fire Cannon. Overall, it looks like the Orn gloves do need a lot of patching because some of the bonus effects can stay after the reroll. For example, this Senna is running around with 9 range because she had a Fishbones in the previous fight. While this sounds positive at first glance, you can also totally get screwed over by items like Silvermare. This artifact locks your attack speed at 0.5, which isn't that big of a deal if it only happens for 1 round, but it is possible for this negative effect to not be cleansed when you're rolling for new artifacts. Based on the stats, it doesn't look like there is a secret Silvermare in the background, you don't get any bonus stats, and the game pretty much just forgot to give the unit back the original attack speed. Similar to the previously mentioned Fishbones bug, this does fix itself after 1 combat, so usually it shouldn't cause that much damage. Enough with the bugs for now, let's look at an alternative way to use one of the new artifacts, Spectral Cutlass. Currently, the common approach to this artifact is to simply have units like Lee Sin or Lysandra teleport to the enemy backline, snipe the enemy carry, and return back home. While this is nice and all, there is a more interesting way to cook with this item. Here's what you can do. Give the item to a frontline unit like Annie and isolate her in the 2nd or 3rd row. Next, place all of your units in the last row. Because the teleport happens before units take aggro, this will force the enemy backline to walk towards your Annie and clump up the entire enemy board. Your own frontline units will also walk into the enemy side, giving your carries more breathing room. Having the enemies clumped up can make abilities like Wei or Azir more impactful and potentially allows you to win a fight that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. If you ever try this out, let me know in the comments how it went for you. The next idea was something I wanted to use in my previous video, but it was a bit hard to get a recording for this interaction. It involves the artifact Horizon Focus, which deals a % health of the enemy as magic damage. One of the first ideas I had when I saw this item was to utilize it against the monster crab in the Crab Rave portal. While some PvE units like the Rift Herald are immune to crowd control, this is not the case for the monster crab. The damage from the monster crab is board wide anyways, so it doesn't really matter if the crab gets hit by crowd control. This means we can utilize Horizon Focus on a CC unit for massive amounts of damage to easily win this matchup. Here I got lucky and even managed to get 2 of them. I gave them to Volibear and Lee Sin in a duelist setup, and I think the result speaks for itself. This crab never stood a chance. Another artifact I was always very interested in was Luden's Tempest. It just has so much potential for a great visual effect where the entire enemy board disappears, and I'm still trying out different setups on how to get the most out of this item. I was curious how the overkill damage interacts with Umbral, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that this actually works. Now, you don't need to go completely crazy with the damage items, especially if you're skipping out on the invokers, but even something like Shojin, Morello and Luden's can potentially create a small snowball effect in the enemy backline, and is something to keep in mind the next time you're playing an Umbral setup. Now, I haven't talked much about the new support items so far, and quite frankly, this is because there's not that much to talk about. Moonstone is pretty good, but the only item that has some interesting interactions is called Spite. Once the holder dies, enemies in range receive an 80 AP debuff, while your own units in range get buffed. Initially, I was curious if you could stack this effect if you combine it with the trench coat, but sadly this doesn't seem to work. I didn't have very high hopes for this item, but someone mentioned that it has a weird interaction with Aurelia, so I decided to check it out myself. As it turns out, Spite can completely shut down Aurelia. I have no idea why, but the moment the enemy Aurelia or your own Aurelia is hit by this item effect, she just stops working for the full 10-second duration. This means the next time your opponent is rushing a Dragonlord Aurelia comp, take Spite with you and get it into the enemy backline with the help of Set or Kha'Zix. The next trick is pretty simple and natural, but I thought it was just too much fun not to share. We all know by now that Tahm Kench is pretty decent with Forbidden Idol because he has a Lanja shield that scales with HP, making him bigger and bigger. This works absolutely amazing in combination with the Augment Dragon Spirit. Tahm is great with a Declaw anyways, so you're not really going out of your way for the setup, and it becomes ridiculously easy to reach all 4 bonus item components in no time. I mean, sure, you can speed up the process with even more declaws, but that's not really necessary unless you want to commit to the meme. The final interaction I want to showcase has to do with the Blighting Jewel. In my initial artifact video, I wasn't very enthusiastic about this one because the item seemed very limited to Teemo, Syndra and Morgana, but there is much more to this item than meets the eye. The condition for Blighting is to deal magic damage, but this is not limited to an ability. Items like Ionic Spark or Bramble Vest also deal magic damage, and this will in fact proc the effect of Blighting Jewel. But this is absolute kids play compared to the best combo in the game with Tattoo of Toxin. Every time your unit deals magic damage, it deals additional magic damage as a damage over time effect for the next 3 seconds. Every single proc here counts, which means if you give Blighting Jewel and Tattoo of Toxin on someone like Teemo, it will only take him seconds to get the enemy team to 0 MR and effectively perma-cast thanks to all the bonus mana he receives. Syndra remains a very good user for this combo as well, since her balls count individually and allow her to easily shred the enemy frontline and continuously cast for the rest of the fight. Morgana is quite interesting because of the Ghostly trait, since the magic damage coming from Ghostly should also count towards Blighting, so she can easily take down the entire enemy team herself as long as your frontline stays alive. This more or less covers everything I wanted to showcase. How are you liking the new items so far? Let me know in the comments. I hope you learned something, and see you next time.
What is this? What the f? What the f am I looking at?